Thank everyone for tuning in this evening to Nature's V. Tonight we have Judge, Your Honor Warren F. Muhammad. He'll tell you he's no longer a judge, but we all know that once you are given that high status, it remains. So we're thankful for him coming on tonight to give us a review of IB 100 and his bout with the SARS COVID 2 virus and how he went about getting back his health and the course that he took. Thank you again for coming on, Judge Warren Muhammad. How are you this evening?
I'm doing fine by Allah's grace. Thank you for having me, brother. And assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. I don't want to belabor the point. What we would like you to do is just tell us about your experience with COVID, what you did to get your health back, and what would you suggest to those who are looking for a direction to go in if they should come in contact with this virus.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you, brother. My story actually spans pretty much all of 2020.
Wow.
It was quite a year for me, and honestly, I don't know really when I contracted the virus. I know that I did attend Savior's Day in what was that the last weekend of February, and I do recall waking up one morning in my hotel room, and I had a bloodshot eye, and I couldn't account for it. I just remember having a bloodshot eye. Woke up early that morning, and actually I got up for prayer, and then I laid back down, and then later it seemed to kind of go away, and I just thought nothing of it, but it was just very unusual, About 2 to 3 weeks, around mid-March, I began to experience some strange symptoms that I couldn't account for. Now, I'm not a scientist or a doctor, so all I can tell you is what happened and how I felt. I was under a lot of stress as well. I was working on a case of litigation that had lasted for 3 years, and I was in the final stages of concluding that case. So I had been under a tremendous amount of stretch for the whole early part of 2020. Lacking sleep, just working around the clock, trying to make sure that we were successful in winning that case, which thank Allah that we were, because I had a client that was severely ill as a result of a doctor's negligence.
Wow.
And I was determined to try to bring justice to that family, and we were successful in that. And actually, that client just died about a month ago now as a result of what happened to her. But nevertheless, it was in mid-March, I started to get chest pains, tightness. It wasn't a sharp pain like what I would imagine a heart attack. I don't know, I've never had a heart attack. But I would get this tightness in my chest, and sometimes I would get a little dizzy and just feel out of sorts, and then it would pass. And then a day later, the tightness would come. And I remember going to a store one day. I got out of my car, and this tightness hit me again, and I felt just kind of out of sorts and a little dizzy. And I got back in my car, didn't even go into the store. Went back home. The next day it came again. I called 911 and had them to come to check my blood pressure and my pulse. I didn't know if I was having a heart attack or what. And they came and said my pressure was okay and I seemed to be okay. They asked me if I wanted to go to the hospital. And I told them, no, I don't think so. In the interim, I had called my primary care physician and kept him advised. And he said, let's just monitor it and see what happens. Just call me if you feel worse or if you feel anything, be sure and call me. The very next day, it came again.
Mm.
And I called the doctor. He told me to go straightway to Methodist Hospital. He would call and have them to admit me, which he did. He admitted me. And by now, it's like the news and the whole scare about COVID was starting up, you know. And so I went to the hospital. They kept me overnight. They looked like a gallon of blood. I think they came every 30 minutes to get blood. And they ran every test that it can imagine. They did echograms, electrocardiograms. They did a stress test. And each test came back normal. You know, so the next day they released me. They released me the next day, and I went home. What they didn't do is they didn't test me for the virus. Mm. And they let me go. And they never mentioned anything about anything coming up in my blood work. So I went home and as I said, I had just about wrapped up that piece of business. So I kind of just took it easy and started to get more rest and kind of find some relaxation and started to feel a little better. And that kind of episode kind of passed. So now that was April, May, sometime in June, I started coughing. A year prior to, I'd had mold in my home, and I had a bad cough with that, and it felt similar. And my son told me that his breathing was affected, so we both concluded that it was probably mold again that had resurfaced in the home. So the cough just progressively got worse and worse, and I left home. I went to my mother's house to stay, because I figured I need to get out of that home that may have been contaminated with mold. Right. And I just progressively got worse with the cough. It was just a nagging cough. Every time, the more I would breathe, like the more I would cough. And so now this was the latter part of June by now. And then it just got really, really bad. And one night I had a fever, and that's when I realized I probably have this virus. Right. I called a doctor friend of mine. He told me he did a prescription for some steroids and some antibiotics. And he knew that I didn't like taking steroids, and I didn't like taking medication, but he insisted to me, you must take this to protect your organs. Wow. And me not knowing it, but I started to take it. And another friend sent me a box full of herbs and what have you. I mean, vitamin D and just different herbs. And, right. You know, and I was taking, I took the steroids, the antibiotics, I'm taking the herbs. I'm just throwing everything against the wall, right? Right. And I'm still getting sicker and sicker to the point I lost weight. I lost my appetite. I just literally, I couldn't eat a can of chicken noodle soup. Wow. I was so weak and just constantly coughing all day long, all night long. Even during my sleep, I'd wake up. It was respiratory, because every time I breathed, I would cough. Right. Now I didn't have sweats. I didn't have any more fever. I didn't lose smell or taste, any of the other things that you say you get. But I just had this cough that was literally about to kill me, because I couldn't breathe from coughing. So I reached out to a doctor here locally that I knew had the access to the supplement, the interferon. But as it would be, he was out of town. I wasn't able to reach him. And so I continued to just go downhill till I literally thought, one night, I don't know if it was a dream or a hallucination, but I was sure that I had a visit from the death angel. And he and I talked about this situation. Yes, sir. And he was telling me yeah, you don't have to suffer like this. You can just come on with me, right? And for a second, I said, that might not be a bad idea. But I said, nah, I think I want to live,
Deceptive intelligence.
Right. So about that same time, I finally heard from Dr. Keeley. He told me he had the supplement. And a good, dear friend and brother, Brother Khalil Muhammad here in Houston. I told him that I couldn't reach my children. I had no way to get this supplement. He drove almost 100 miles to go to Dr. Keeley's home and pick that supplement up and bring that to me. So I will forever be thankful.
Was that the former regional captain?
The former regional captain.
Yes, sir.
The former regional. That shows you what kind of man and what kind of Muslim he is.
A good man.
Yes. So he went and got the supplement, and I started taking it that night. And then I think I was taking maybe a third of a dropper full.
Okay. And that supplement being IB 100?
IB 100, the Immunoboost 100.
Yes, sir.
The Immunoboost 100.
Yes, sir.
And I guess in about 2 days of taking it, I noticed one morning I woke up and I was hungry.
Right.
And I literally had not been able to eat.
Right.
Had no appetite. I couldn't even look at food.
Right.
I woke up and I was like, oh my God, I'm hungry. And I'll never forget, I went downstairs to my kitchen and I ate a banana and a large bowl of blueberries. I'll never forget that meal.
Yes, sir.
And when that happened, I gained hope. I said, I must be getting better, And then from that point on, it was just a steady rise in the way I felt. So by then I felt strong enough to go get tested. And when I went and got tested, they did come back positive that you have the virus. But I continued to take the IB 100, and I just continued. The symptoms got better and better. My breathing started to return. The cough diminished, gradually but surely, day by day, until I actually started getting up and going for a walk. Sitting outside in the sun. My strength started to gradually come back. My mother tells me when I left her home, I was weaker than a dirty dish rag. That's what she told me I looked like.
Okay.
That's what and when your mama tells you that, it's pretty bad, right?
That's pretty bad.
So I started getting stronger. They tested me, and then the cough slowly diminished until it was just a periodic cough. I went back, I got tested again, and they told me that I did have antibodies. But they said I was still with the virus. I imagine a week later, the cough had gone completely. I went and got tested, and I tested negative.
Wow.
And my strength had come back. I started, walking. I started exercising again. I started riding the bicycle. Now my lungs were beat up at first.
Right.
So it was a task to do, long walks. And sometimes I would go a little too far and then have to take another day or two in the bed, And but slowly but surely, my strength started to come back, and eventually I was riding 6 miles a day on a bicycle and feeling fine. So let's fast forward. I started working out with a trainer, doing different exercises, and I'm one of those guys. I'll overdo it.
Yes, sir.
You just say do 10 push-ups. I want to do 15 or 20.
Right.
I'm one of those guys.
Right.
So
young man.
Right. In my mind.
Young man mentality. That's how you stay young.
Right. So I one morning I woke up and I had a fallen arch in my foot, very painful. And I started rolling it to try to get the spasm out of it. And I bought some insoles to put in my shoes. And when I put those insoles in my shoes and stood up, I immediately felt intense back pain.
Wow.
And after that, I started to feel numbness coming down my left leg with sciatica.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a previous back surgery about 20 years ago. On that same side, I had severe sciatica from a herniated disc on the left side. And I always had a little numbness in my foot from that. But the numbness started to increase and actually spread to my right leg, my right foot as well, and periodically during the night. And I just couldn't figure out what the cause of it was. And I assume I started to panic a little bit too. I didn't know if I'd never been diagnosed as diabetic. Right. Sometimes I was pre-diabetic because when you take those steroids, that's what's going to happen. Your sugar's going to go up.
Yes, sir.
So I went to a neuropathy clinic. I went to another neuropathy clinic. They started telling me for $25,000 they could do stem cell, and for $10,000 they could do this. I'm like, y'all trying to get in my pocket, right? But they couldn't tell me what the source, the cause was.
Right.
So I started to think maybe it's a circulation problem. So I went to a cardiologist here in Houston, and who to this day I'm very impressed with. And I've got to go back to see him on Monday to get some more blood work. But I went to that cardiologist, and I'll promote him if it's okay.
Oh, yes, sir.
His name is Baxter Montgomery, Dr.
Yes,
Baxter Montgomery here in Houston. And the significant thing about Dr. Montgomery is he's a board certified cardiologist. If you need surgery on your heart, he can do it. He does it. But he treats his patients at his clinic through a nutritional approach.
Yes, sir.
And he's noted for being able to get patients off of medication with chronic illness, cardiovascular disease, diabetes. So I'll try to get to it. While I was there, they took blood work. And he told me what kind of, diet he wanted me on for the next 28 days. And it didn't conflict with the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So I said, okay, I'll try it. Long story short, about a week later, I was supposed to go back for a follow-up. They called me and told me that I could not come into the office because I had the virus. I was astounded because I felt perfectly fine. Other than the numbness in my feet, I felt fine. I said, I couldn't have the virus. They said, oh no, you have antibodies in your blood. Mm. So I said, I'm not surprised that I have antibodies. I had the virus back in the summer. And they said, no, you have long-term and short-term antibodies. And the short-term antibodies indicate that you have come in contact with the virus again and you've contracted the virus, because that's what the short-term antibodies do.
Right.
I said, okay, well, so they did a telephone consultation with me and told me about all of my tests. My organs were fine, kidneys fine, liver, heart, all that's fine. So I said, they said, before you can come back in, you need to go and get a COVID test. So a few days later, I made an appointment. I went in to get a COVID test. Now, this is really going to crack you up. I'm sitting there to get the COVID test, and she did the swab in my nostril. And so the nurse was then putting information into her computer. She said, have you had a fever? I said, no. She said, have you lost your smell? No. Have you lost your taste? No. She looked at me. She said, why are you here getting tested? She said, you have no symptoms? I said, no symptoms.
Right.
She said, well, why are you here? I said, my cardiologist told me I needed to come get tested because they found antibodies in my blood. She said, I will quote her, Brother Eric. She said, Mr. Muhammad, you need to go and sell some of your blood. She said, they will pay for some of your blood with these antibodies. She said, Mr. Muhammad, you have gold in your veins. Literally. Right. So I couldn't take it. So they released me, took me back. And then when the test result came back, it said it detected no virus.
Mm.
No virus was detected. So I didn't know what to make of that, you know. I call Dr. Keeley, the person that provided me with the IB 100, the Immunoboost 100. And I'll never forget one thing he told me as I was getting over the first episode with the virus when it was severe. He told me to continue taking it.
Right.
I didn't necessarily have to take it every day, but at least 3 times a week, 3, 4 times a week, make sure I take it. And since that time, I have continued to take the IB 100. And so here I am today talking to you. And Dr. Keeley said the only thing he could think of is that somewhere I came into contact with someone that had the virus, or maybe I was in a public place and someone had sneezed or coughed and it was in the air. He said I probably came into contact with it somewhere, and the antibodies in my system immediately went to work and knocked it out and got rid of it. Because by the time I took another COVID test, they detected no virus in my body.
Well, that's a testimony, and in light of the current environment here in Cuba, and them taking the recombinant version of the nasal interferon 2B and giving it to those who come into the country now for 10 days and those who have come in contact with those who come to the country for 10 days, and they're requiring the people who are going to be receiving them to take it for 3 days prior to them coming. The supplement IB 100, of course, is 27-year history of dealing with viruses, and of course your testimony of how you used it, and there's upwards of 300 people who have used it for the same exact thing at this point in time. So we've come to a crossroad in time as it relates to our own health, what the people who are in charge of the national health say, and what we're going to do with the choices that we have to make. Mm-hmm. In a theater of law, how do you see us moving forward, not wanting to take the vaccine, however, living in America and having these other options? What would your background in law lead you to recommend for those of us who would prefer to take IB 100 or a supplement like that, which they have in Cuba, but we live in America?
Well, that's a very pertinent question, and I don't have any firm answers, but I can tell you a couple of things I can say. I was just on a conference call with a group of attorneys, and we were discussing this very issue concerning the vaccine. At the end of the day, I'm not going to tell anyone to take it or not to take it. That's a personal decision that they have to make. But in law, we always, there's a standard which is called an informed decision.
Okay.
So everyone should do everything they can to get as much information as they can, not only about the vaccine, but about other treatment options. And there are other treatment options. And get as much information as you can and inform yourself to the best of your ability before you make a decision. Now, if a person decides to take the vaccine, that's their decision.
Right. And
for those who decide not to, that's their decision. My decision at this point in time is that I'm not taking it. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan instructed us not to take it, and I'm going to hear and obey. And then based on my own personal experience, I do believe that there is a viable option because I took it and I got well and I continued to take it. And apparently it did the job the second time around. So,
yes, sir.
That's my decision. But the other thing that's important that we must take note of, and this was the subject of the call that I was on with some other attorneys, is the language keeps popping up concerning the word mandatory. And at this point, to my knowledge, it is not mandatory to take the vaccine. However, that's not to say at some point in time, the government may try to make it mandatory. And I'm a believer, and as a group of attorneys, we are believers that there's a long, they can say it, but we have rights.
Right.
We have rights as human beings. We have rights under the Constitution. We have rights under law. That in order to make something mandatory, that they have to meet certain standards and criteria, and that's a high bar to reach. So I think the public should educate themselves as well, or seek counsel in terms of what their rights are, in terms of standing on whatever their decision is. If that decision is not to make it, what their legal rights are. I don't believe that constitutionally that it can be mandated as a mandatory vaccine unless they overcome that very high legal hurdle. And I'll just give my personal opinion is that it would have to be shown that there is no viable alternative to make such a thing mandatory. It's like saying it's mandatory that you take Tylenol for a headache. Well, why can't I take Advil? They both address a headache, right?
Right.
So that's just the logic in it,
right,
that I think they would have to overcome.
Right.
So I think it's incumbent upon those of us who have experienced an option or are familiar with an option to compile that data in real life testimonies, and that's why I was welcomed the opportunity to come on and share my experience. As I say, I'm not coming on here as a scientist or a doctor. I'm just coming on as someone who survived and has pretty much returned to health. And I say pretty much because I'm still dealing with that numbness, which and you and I have talked about that. I think it's more low back issues and previous spinal surgeries and stuff like that, so nothing to do with the virus, I don't believe. So anyway, that's kind of my opinion on it, but we have to marshal our resources and marshal our forces to be able to fight that fight concerning if and when it's declared to be mandatory. And one more thing, I was on a call just earlier today. A brother was saying that they're going to, at some point, they're going to require the vaccine if you want to travel out of the country. Or maybe certain employers are going to make it part of their employment policies that you can't work unless you have the vaccine. Or the federal government, it would be difficult for the federal government to mandate it. However, states may mandate it under state law. Long story short, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad told us to separate. And maybe this is a separation movement in effect.
Well, it definitely is his movement.
Right.
So thank you for sharing with us this today. I will say that in Havana, there is a movement to use what is known as interferon 2B nasally, and that has been the course of action that they're going to take with all of the citizens of Cuba. There are very good health benefits from it. It is a recombinant version. There are supplements, as you know, that we offer at Nature's V that have the same characteristics as a protein in the gamma, the alpha, and the two combined. We now have the 10-day, just like they're requiring in Havana for those who are interested in using it as a prophylactic and as a treatment for. And of course, we have the flagship IB 100 30-day here in Nature's V that many people are using for prophylactic and a therapy to get beyond any influenza that they're dealing with and many other things like HIV, herpes, autoimmune diseases. The world knows the benefit of the protein called interferon alpha. They also know that it will remove most illnesses that do exist. So they've kept it out of the mainstream for many years because you can't make money if people aren't sick. But like you said, we do have to make a decision as full grown adults. And my 62 years on the planet have told me that I'm going to have to make a decision. That's
Mhm.
why I came to Havana. I made my decision. You know, I prefer freedom to tyranny. And, I don't care how well you live under tyranny, it's still tyranny. So we thank you for coming on today. We thank you for sharing your experience. We thank you for allowing us to hear the experience at over the time that it took place. And I hope that many people benefit. My name is Erica Hod with Nature's V. You can receive the supplement at natures-v.com. We thank you, Judge Warren F. Muhammad, for your honest review of the product and the circumstances that you went through with COVID, and we hope that many will benefit for it. Do you have any closing remarks you would like to make before we go off?
Yes, I have one closing remark concerning the use of the product in Cuba. I guess it's been 3 or 4 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, at a nonprofit that I'm a part of. We hosted a podcast concerning the coronavirus, and we had 2 doctors. One was the doctor that supplied me with the Immunoboost 100, Dr. Akili Muhammad. The other was and I forget her name, but she was a physician, practicing family practice physician. And she is seeing patients with the virus and on the front lines treating, so I commend her for that. But the point I want to get to concerning Cuba, when the question was raised concerning other options for treatment and the interferon that was being used in Cuba, this doctor had never heard of it, had no idea about what Cuba was doing, what treatment they were using. So I say that to say this, that as individuals, as people, we have to do research of our own. We have to break out, we have to access, there's a whole world going on out here, and we cannot listen to just the one voice that comes over CNN and Channel 13 and NBC and ABC, because they can filter the information that you get. And I really was astounded to hear a medical doctor, a physician, say that they were not aware of the uses and advances that were taking place in the medical community in Cuba in dealing with this pandemic. It shocked me. So you have to be, I don't think it's enough just to go to a doctor and take it at face value what they say. You have to do some research.
Well, you heard it straight from the judge's mouth, and we agree here at Nature's V, along with Mr. Victor Muhammad, who is the creator of the supplement that we're talking about at Life Sciences of Washington, Inc. We believe in the new health paradigm that doctors won't even be necessary because they only prescribe prescriptions. We will have physicians, we will have other things, but those who have limited their understanding to a PDR and looking at a book to give you a drug, they've outlived their usefulness. We'll be taking on a more natural approach to health, and God willing, we'll see a lot more healthier people. So thank you very much, Judge Muhammad, and we thank our viewers for tuning in tonight. Please tune in next week with Mr. Victor Muhammad, and we'll be dealing with cancer and immunotherapy. May everybody have a good evening. God bless. Greetings. Good night.
Peace.
Peace.